Hey guys, welcome to week 3. Let's go ahead and get started with what you're expected to do in week number 3. So the learning objectives for week number 3 for 8130 are participants can describe how technology is both disruptive and constructively transformative force. Participants can describe how technology can support an environment for deep learning and sustaining connections and creating opportunities for thinking and learning collaboratively. When you get into chapter 4, participants can provide a historical context to the educational developments that have led us to an era of engagement. Also, participants are able to use web conferencing to conduct interactive virtual class sessions, and participants become more proficient using Google Slides. So we will go ahead and continue. In week number 3, you're going to be reading chapters 3 and 4, which are the same chapters that you read last week. So hopefully, by now you should have not have to reread them. So you're just continuing right for the same chapters that you took the quizzes on last week. And what you're going to be doing is taking that same material and you're going to be developing a web conference session. This should be your second web conference session, but this one is a little different. It's going to be synchronous. You're going to have at least 2 fake students, and you'll be using the assessment tools for students to demonstrate their mastery. So it will be the students that are using the tools and not the instructor. To let us know you're done, you'll post a self-reflection. Each person is also responsible to be a fake student in 2 other people's web conferences, and then you have a peer review due next Tuesday. So that's what's going on this week. So let's talk about the web conference, the synchronous web conference with assessment tools. I will try to do a demonstration here, and we'll go through the requirements all at the same time. So we'll get started. So the requirements, again, it's week 3. You need to be a fake student in at least, so you have to have at least 2 people in there. So that's what's due this week. You'll do the same again. Chapters 3 and 4 is what you pick, one or the other. You guys are empowered to pick the one that you want to do the web conference on, but it's either 3 or 4. You wouldn't have time to do both. So you're going to do the learning objectives. Now, I've had a couple of people ask me this question. You use these learning objectives for either 3 or 4 to base your own web conference on, but then when you develop your own learning objectives for your sessions, you don't use these particular learning objectives. You develop your own customized and personalized learning objectives that are applicable to your session. So this is just to get you started, to explain what I want the web conference to kind of be based on, but then you have to develop your own learning objectives. Now in this session, it's a little bit different, quite a bit different actually than your first. You're actually going to have students in there, which trust me, you will like this so much better. It's so much more fun. And it's synchronous, and so the students will be using the tools to demonstrate their learning. You need to have at least one group member in your session, and you can choose to use family or friends as the other, or it could be more than that if you want, but you need to have at least 2 fake students, one of which is a group member, hopefully 2, and then you can invite other folks to the session if you like. In the web conference session, again, just focus on the big ideas because it should only be about 10, maximum 15 minutes. So you're just going to pick a few of the big ideas, and then what's key about this is all throughout the entire session, very frequently after each phase, you're going to be assessing for understanding. So that should be about every minute or so. You're going to be getting the students involved. So you won't be able to do all, you will not be, able to do an information dump that you include all the ideas and it's you talking the whole time. It's actually just the opposite. You're going to pick just a few big ideas of all of them that are in the chapter, and you'll do these short little mini lectures, and then you will ask students what they know about it with some type of an activity, whether it's a poll or it's a writing prompt or it's a text chat. That's what you need to be doing all throughout it. Now, While you're going to be having live students in your session, you should also assume that there will be virtual students out there that will watch your session at a later date. So while you're giving your session, you need to make it interactive for your live students and also reach out and speak to your virtual students. So maybe you greet them at the beginning of your session, or maybe you have an activity for your live students and then you're going to give your virtual students an option to do something when they post their missed class summary. So don't forget about both student audiences as you go through your presentation. So again, max of 10 to 15 minutes. I'll give you a 5-minute grace period, but please do not go beyond that. So remember the basic web conference requirements that all sessions have. You need to do all that pre-conference setup ahead of time. Get your slides made up ahead of time, save them to PDFs, all that good stuff, and then your basic requirements and where you're going to get these. If you go into Pilot and on the web conference information, I have detailed information about what's required in each one of those. But each session needs to demonstrate high levels of content and technology mastery. You need to design your session using the practical inquiry model, which is going to include the triggering phase, the exploration phase, the integration phase, and the resolution phase. You should have a high quality presentation. Again, look at the exact requirements in Pilot, how I define that, and then also make sure that you have high quality slides. And again, look and see how I define that in the assignment requirements. Now, specifically for this assignment for your second web conference, there's things that make this web conference different than the first one and different than the third one. So in this particular session, it's going to be a synchronous web conference. You'll have at least 2 fake students, and you'll have the students use these tools within Blackboard Ultra to demonstrate their learning. So the students you need to have an activity where they raise their hand, where they're using their text chat, or you're asking them to do polling, or you're asking students to maybe share a quick emoticon, where the students have to use their pointer tools, where they have to use their pencil or shape tool to circle something on the whiteboard, where you're asking students to type something in the text tool, where you're asking students to use the talk tool. And all the way as you're doing that, you might need to talk students through how to do that. You're demonstrating your content and technical mastery. So to be very, very specific, it is not you, the instructor, that will be doing these tools. You can if you want. I mean, you won't be graded down if you use them. If you want to point something out, that's perfectly fine. But to receive credit for it, you need to be designing activities that you require. You're asking students to do these tools, and as the instructor, you need to be technically proficient to be able to walk your students how to do it, to give them instructions. And so that means you need to understand how to use these tools at an even higher and more proficient level, because you have to help them to do it too. So you'll be doing these short mini lectures, 2 to 3 slides, followed by an assessment that students do it. That should be the entire design. So here's an example of how it might go. So you're going to start your session, and then maybe you do a triggering phase. And at the end of 2 or 3 slides, the students have to do something, maybe an example with the text chat. Then you're going to do some exploration, which again, short mini lectures, and perhaps students need to do a poll to answer, or maybe again a little bit more exploration, and students have to share an emoticon how they're feeling. And then you get into the integration phase, and students might have to do something on the whiteboard where they circle something on the whiteboard or use the pen on the whiteboard. And the resolution phase might be a little mini lecture, and where students have to do an assessment to demonstrate their learning by clicking on the talk and answering a question. So you want to design activities where students are required to use these tools to demonstrate their understanding, reflection, or applying their knowledge all the way through the different session. So using this practical inquiry model, make sure that each one of the phases, the triggering, exploration, integration phase, and the resolution phase, all have a slide that clearly identifies that you're going into that particular section. I would recommend like either a solid black slide or a solid gray slide that has white text on it that identifies, hey, this is the section. And this is strictly an assignment requirement. It is nothing you would ever do in a regular group of slides for a web conference. So just pretend like that slide isn't even there. Don't acknowledge it. Don't say, hey, here's the triggering phase. Just show it for a second so that I know it's there, your instructor knows it there, and that you know it's there. It kind of prompts you or reminds you. This is the way to gently remind all of us that we have to be using these four phases of the practical inquiry model to design effective education per the textbook author Garrison. So that's what we're looking for in this assignment. I would where this assignment is kind of similar to your first web conference. When you do each phase, you're going to have just a few slides, maybe one, two, or three. And then right after that, you're going to do an activity or an assessment to measure the students' learning. So after the triggering phase, you might do an activity such as polling, text chat, whiteboard, voice, emoticons, writing prompts, self-reflection, all sorts of different things, going into your learning management system and posting a response in discussions, going into your learning management system and completing a quiz, all sorts of different things. And then it just repeats. The triggering phase is the introductory phase. It might be where you share the learning objectives, a hook and hold. The exploration phase is, think of that as the lecturing part of it, but keep it short so that it's only 2 to 3 slides for a mini lecture. And again, follow that up with some kind of an assessment with all the things we just mentioned. In integration phase, and as I had shared last for the first web conference, I think the integration phase is the most important. This is where you're asking students to take that content, that stuff they're learning, and integrate it so that it really means something to them. They're integrated into something that has personal meaning. So that might be integrating it into their discipline or their field. So if they're a nurse, you're going to talk about learning and how does that apply to being a nurse. Or if students are a history major, how does that integrate into something they already know? So that gives them opportunities to reflect, and maybe you want to have them do a writing activity. And then the final phase is the resolution phase. So maybe there's a couple of slides where you just do a very short mini lecture. You're going to ask them for some feedback. Do they have any questions? And then those are ways to use some of those tools because they can type in the text chat, or you can do the poll with them, or you can ask them to get on the microphone if they have any questions. All ways to keep them involved throughout the entire process. To let us know, to let the instructor know, and your peers, because they have to do a peer review of you. You're going to post a self-reflection by Saturday at midnight, and the same type of self-reflection you have in every other class. What were your strengths, your weaknesses, surprises, disappointments, plans for improvement, and make sure you have the headers for the section. And then by the following Tuesday, you need to go in and your group needs to decide how you're going to do the peer review. You guys can decide how you want to do it. My only criteria is that every single person needs to do a peer review and every single person needs to get a peer review. So if the person that you're scheduled to do a peer review has not posted his or her assignment, just do somebody else in your group, because I don't want you penalized in a case where they had not done their assignment. So let's go ahead and do the live demo for the web conference. Some things I can't show you because it's behind the scenes, but we talked about the requirements for all the sessions. But when you do the setup, just a reminder, always Google Chrome, always, always, always. It's the only one that works with the audio, and so you always want to stick with Google Chrome for remind your students to use it and you want to use it. And a reminder for your PowerPoint slides to go ahead and save it to a PDF like what we talked about for the first session, and then you have to upload that to Ultra. So let me go ahead and pause this recording, and I'm going to go ahead and get Ultra up and going so that we can give a demonstration as we go through here. So give me a minute. I'm going to pause. Okay, I'm done with the pause. Hopefully that worked right in the video. So let me go ahead and try to pull this slide up. Give me a minute. I'm going to pull up the web conference. There we go. And uh, what you want to do is, when you're getting started, it opens up and it looks kind of like this. And remember, it's not very intuitive. You want to come down here to the lower right-hand corner in the Open Collaborate panel, and you're going to go ahead and click on the tab, the Share Content tab, and you're going to come over here to Share Files. And this is where you're going to upload the files. And you can click on that plus and get files uploaded, but I find it's quicker to drag it over and drop it right on top of there and then to let go. I find it's about 3 times faster, but do what works for you. And then it uploads it, and you're going to have the files. I'm going to recommend, even though you can upload multiple files, it's kind of kludgy going back and forth between different files. So make sure your PowerPoints are in all one stack or one presentation. And so when you get it uploaded, I'll go here and you're going to click on it, and you will click Share Now, and click on the slide that you want to show, and it will show over here on the left hand side. And I'm going to go ahead and take that. We'll stop sharing there, and I'm going to go ahead and close down merge it all together. So when I click on it one more time and Share Now and click on a slide, it's going to show over here in the left-hand window. And how you navigate through the different slides once it starts is you just keep clicking next, and you go back and forth, and that's how you navigate through the slides. So let me pop back to my presentation. All right, so you make sure it's Google Chrome, you saved it to PowerPoint, PDF, you uploaded your slides, and if you want to, you can log in as a fake student on a separate computer. Now, you need to go ahead and start your recording, and let me go back to the live session over here. And how you would do that is in the upper left-hand corner, and hopefully you can see my mouse moving around. You're going to click on the Open Session menu, and when you click on it, you will come down here and click on Start Recording, and then you obviously do just the opposite thing when you're ready to stop recording. You click on the same area and click on Stop Recording, so that's pretty simple, and it's pretty self-explanatory. So I will go ahead and close that, and let's go back to our PowerPoint. We will keep going through the presentation. So you want to start your session. You want to have an opening slide. It doesn't have to look like the one. This is the one that I use, but you definitely want to have the week number or the date or the time or anything that you need them to know. I like to have these instructions on here to remind everybody that you do need to run the audio setup each and every time, and then how to set it up. And especially for new users, it allows them to get started ahead of time. Remind them to do something to shut the door, all those good things. That's a good reminder for, as a matter of fact, I'm reaching over and taking the phone off the hook right now because you don't want to be disturbed as the session is going on. So I would come up with some kind of a slide to remind them to remove those distractions. I like everybody to take a deep breath. You're not required to do this. I personally like doing it, but it's up to you to do something about, like, if you want to take a deep breath. But you definitely do need to do a quality check. It just helps verify, is it is the record in session? Do you see, are the slides advancing properly? And is the microphone working? So you definitely need something like this. You're welcome to use something similar to what I have, or come up with it on your own. And then what you're going to do is start going into the different phases. The triggering phase is the first one, and so you do need to include a PowerPoint slide that has the name of the phase listed, and I would recommend like a solid, that it does not look like a beyond bullet point slide, so that it clearly differentiates itself. So what most students do is have a solid black background with just white text that says triggering phase. And just a reminder, this is definitely only for assignment purposes. This is something that you would never do in real life. And so what I'm asking you to do is that when this slide comes up, just show it for a nanosecond and then move on. Don't even acknowledge it. Don't even say it. Don't even say, and now we're in the triggering phase. Just pretend like it's not even there. So just, keep going as it comes up. But then once you get into the triggering phase, that's where you're going to do something. Here's some examples of things that you may want to think about doing in the triggering phase. It's the introductory phase where you're getting students prepped and ready to learn. So maybe you share the learning objectives. And the learning objectives are ones that you personalize and write for your own web conference session. They are not the ones that I included, in this class. So it needs to be personalized and written from your perspective that's applicable for your session. And then maybe you include a hook and hold activity where you're going to get students excited and ready to learn, just like we did in the UBD class. Maybe you do an icebreaker with them, or something that's, tied to the learning objectives. And maybe you need to share a little bit of information. So this could all be information that's in the triggering. But then once you're done, 2 or 3 slides, maybe 4 at the most, you're going to do some type of activity or assessment to get feedback from your students, to keep them involved, to keep them engaged, and to measure, are they getting what you're saying? And some examples of things that you may want to do. You may want to have them raise their hand. And so this is what something like that would look like technically. I'll go ahead and pull it up. And so you're in the middle of it and you're ready to do that activity. You would just prompt them to come down at the 4 little icons below. You guys know how to do this because we're in the you do this in our classes, but you're going to need to walk them through how to do it. And I would recommend that you have a slide with the prompt, and then also with the directions, and maybe even a little screenshot. So you're going to prompt them on the slide here. It'll have directions, and then they'll come down here and click on the raise hand, and in that case, we will want to see the activities, and you can see the little pink hand go up. The instructor can see that, and you'll have to remind them to click it again to take their hand down. So maybe you say to them, well, how many of you have ever heard of brain-based learning or beyond bullet point design? And then you can see some have their hands up and some don't. So that's definitely a way to do some assessment. All right, so again, in summary here, what you're going to do is have like maybe the question here, directions of students how to do it. Maybe you have a screenshot, and maybe instead of raised hand, you're going to use the other option, which is where students click on their little profile name and they agree or disagree, or maybe they're happy or sad, or, so in that case, I'll go ahead and show you how that looks. With a live session. So you're going to come over here and prompt them to click on their profile, or if they don't have their picture, and it's going to look, I think, like a little gray guy if I'm not mistaken. So they click on their picture, which is the first icon, and then maybe they're going to agree. Or maybe they're going to disagree. So this is where you can get some quick feedback from them. And so if you're having class and you just have a ton of information, and you don't have time to stop and spend a whole lot of time on activities, having them agree or disagree takes a nanosecond, especially if you have a really large class. Let's say you had a class of 50 students. You could have them do this and it wouldn't take any longer for 50 students versus 5. So it's just a great quick way to get quick feedback. And then they can choose, are you happy? Are you sad? You go faster, slower, but certainly agree and disagree. And then you can clear it down there. So coming back to other ways you can use assessment, perhaps you can ask students to do a text chat tool activity. Now, the way you want the key to this is designing your PowerPoint slides. That's where the bulk of the work, that's where the bulk of the information is held. So you're going to have the question or the prompt that you want them to answer or respond to, and then you're going to give them directions about how to do that, and maybe even include a little screenshot for them to see how to do it. Now, the key to designing an effective text chat activity is that you don't want to do something where it takes forever for them to type it in. Sometimes I've messed up and people are typing and typing and typing, and I'm thinking to myself, oh my gosh, this is taking forever. In cases where it's going to take too long to type it in, have them click and volunteer and put their hand up and then do the voice response. But the text chat, the beauty of that, if it's short, then you can get every single person in the class responding, versus when you do voice, it might be one or two or maybe three because it takes so much time. So, what this looks like. In the live session is you're going to be walking them through. Now, this is one of the things about Blackboard Collaborate that I'm not really crazy about, that you have to keep using these tabs to navigate. So, you're going to have to click over here on text chat. They might have to, well, let's go back and see what it looks like. This is what it looks like from a student's perspective that's not clicked on that everyone before. So you will need to have this in the directions. You will need to be able to walk through with what they have to do. So you'll be saying, hey, you guys need to click on the, maybe it's right here. You tell them to come over here and click on the chat tab, which looks like a little balloon is what I usually say. You need to prompt them to click on the everyone. And then what a lot of students want to do is they want to click up here at the top and type, because it doesn't seem intuitive to come all the way down here to click. So you have to coach them, go all the way to the bottom and type in, type in at the bottom, and then maybe you want them just to do a smiley face to let you know how you're feeling. So that could be an activity that you have going on. But the key to doing this is make sure you have your question on the PowerPoint slide, directions on how to do this, and it's going to be short so that it doesn't take too much time and you're not waiting and waiting and waiting. So I showed you the emoticons that you could possibly do that. So now let's say you're going to go into the exploration phase. Just a reminder, you need a slide that says exploration phase. Solid dark, completely different than beyond bullet point. Don't even acknowledge it's there. Just show it and keep on moving. So in this one, the exploration phase is where you're actually going to be sharing information. You're going to be exploring more of the ideas. A lot of people think this is kind of where the lecture portion of the presentation is. And so you might have 2 or 3 slides, because remember, we're just going to do mini ideas. So you might do a little mini lecture here, but then you need to stop and cue them and say, okay, we just talked about this idea. Let me see if you guys understand it. And some of the activities that you may want to do with them, you may want to do a polling activity with them. And we showed this last week, but after the video, I did go in and I did see that the polls do not record in the session. So this is definitely meant for live students. So when you do the polling activity, the key to this is you want to write the question and the possible answers for it on your slide. Ultra is really kind of simple. The work for a lot of this stuff is done on these PowerPoint slides. That's where you're going to spend all your time. So you write your question, you write your 3 to 5 answers, and then you're going to put up that polling activity. And how that looks, I will go ahead and pull this up. Give me a minute. And so you're here, and for you to get there, you're going to click on the Share Content tab, and this is where pretty much all the activities are. And you can see right there, it's very, 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 very intuitive. Click on polling, you pick the number of choices, 4 choices, and then you click on start. Now, something to be aware when you give the choices, most people logically would put, is it A, B, C, or D? But notice within Blackboard Ultra, it's 1, 2, 3. It's numerical choices. So on your PowerPoint slide, make sure that you're using numerical choices so that they correspond to the polling tool itself. And that's where students are going to come and they're going to pick their activity. And you can come down here if you don't want students to see what everybody else is picking. You can select it so that it's not visible to everybody. And then when you're done with a poll, these little squares within the circles is when you end a specific tool. So you would click that, and then the polling is done. And be sure to then remember your virtual students to talk them through what the answer is, because they probably will not be seeing that polling tool itself, but they are seeing the PowerPoint slide, and so you can still walk through the response so they can keep up with what's going on. Okay, coming back, other tools you can do. Another, there's 2 here. Well, no, I didn't include the other one, but maybe you have a couple of options like, is it a dog? Is it a cat? They can just use the pointer. So in this case, is it A, B, C? You can come over here to the slide itself, and let me pull it up. And students, you would need to, again, walk them through how to do it. They would click on the pointer and they would say, oh, it's right here. Now you can see the pointer is not, really big, but you can follow it. It does show up a little bit, or maybe it's the N in honor, or you say, click on the C in code. They can point to something. But all of these whiteboard tools can be used to do activities. So if you had several options here, they could click on the shapes and rectangle, and if they needed to click on the word honor, so they can make choices. So you could have different answers, different pictures, and you're like, use the whiteboard shape to circle or highlight what the right answer is. They can come in here and they can change colors. So if you want one student to use red and you want one student to use blue, so I didn't change, forgive me, let me do that again. There we go, blue, so that you can, Sally's got red, Billy's got blue, so that it keeps it straight. And then you can click on the text tool and type in, again, to use, you have a question and they type in the answer here. And then when it's all said and done, if you need to clear it out, you can click clear. These only go on this whiteboard portion, and obviously your PowerPoint, your original PowerPoint, is back on the computer, so it doesn't muck up your original PowerPoints, which is really nice. So we will come back here. So in this case, they could, if B was the right answer, they use that pointer tool, they pick the answer, and then you can give them feedback. Well, no, that's not right because, or actually, as we're talking here, the better way to do this would be to have them pick the right answer and then have them give their rationale, because that's going to allow them to go to deeper levels of understanding to support their answer, and then open it up to the class. Is that right? Is that wrong? And you can spark some conversation. So that's probably a better way to do it, to get them doing the work versus you. And then you're going to go to the integration phase. Again, remember, you need a slide that says this is the integration phase. Don't even say it, just keep on going. But like I said earlier, this is what I think the most important phase is. This is going to integrate it into something that's meaningful to them, so that it helps take that content and make connections to other parts of their brain, what they previously know and understand, and then hopefully get it into long-term transfer type of learning. So maybe you need a couple of slides to build up where you're going or to do a short mini lecture, and then you get right into the assessments. Well, how does this apply to you? Or take a piece of paper out and pause this video, and I want you to do write for 5 minutes about how what we're talking about today applies to your discipline, whether you're a nurse or a teacher or a college professor. Make that connection. Or maybe you want them to go to their learning management system discussion prompt and post that answer in there and then respond to two of their colleagues. So there's all sorts of different assessments. That pencil tool, and or the shape tool that we talked about earlier. In that case, let me go back in. I don't think I showed you the pencil tool. In this case, the pencil tool I think is pretty powerful. So the students can click on the pencil and they can circle things, they can write, they can draw, but this is nice if you have a couple of different options and they just want to circle the answer, or they want to underline the answer, or let's say they want to underline solve. So circle's pretty powerful there. Okay, moving on. Shapes, and then we come into the resolution phase, and you definitely want to have that slide, maybe a couple of slides to share the information. And again, you guys get the routine where you're going to have an assessment. Just a reminder, it's going to be the students doing these tools and not the instructor, so you have to design them that way. But one more reminder that the power of this is done on the slide itself. So it's very difficult if you don't put the information on the slide and you're just verbally saying it to the students. So if I was just to say to you, what is the color of Mars on the left side in the upper ventricle, blah, 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 it's cognitive overloads. But if it's written here on the slide that they can read it, it's much easier. And then down here, even have a place for them to write that information down. Or the talk tool, where same idea, you have the question on the slide, you give them directions that, hey, to answer this, you're going to need to click on audio to answer it, and they can just click and answer. And what this looks like from a live situation, we will bounce back and forth. The line could be written down here that they're going to respond to, and then they would click on the text tool and come down here and they would type in answer here. Or if that's going to take too long and it's going to be a longer response, then you would, oh my goodness, yes, you would. I was just looking down here and I thought that I was doing this without the microphone on, but we're doing this through Camtasia, so that's not an issue. This is where you would have them click on the microphone to talk. So we're good to go there. So coming back over here, that is where they would do that. So conclusion. You're going to need to have a conclusion to wrap up your session, to let them know that you're done, remind them about the next class. So that's now when you're done, you need to stop the recording. And I showed this to you last week, but how this looks is you're going to click over here, and I never started the recording, so it's not going to say stop recording. But once the recording starts, you're going to come over here and click on, stop. So it's in the exact same spot there. So that's a little tutorial on how to do your session. Now, a reminder, it saves it. Sometimes it takes overnight to save it. Usually it's only about 2 hours, but it's kind of convoluted where you find these sessions. Just a reminder, you're going to go into content number 1, and number 2, you're going to come down here to web conferencing. Number 3, you're going to click on that link to web conferencing links. And number 4, when that comes up, you click on the little menu right there, and then you click on recordings, and it should have your name and look for the date, and that's how you're going to find the recording there. So before we get out of here, I do want to do another activity with you about beyond bullet point, and I'm going to use a different learning technique to give you guys some experience with. I've been doing some reading about a new teaching methodology, and it's called perceptual learning. And instead of doing a lecture where I will tell you about something, this is going to be an activity where you pick the right answer, even if you know nothing about the content. The research is showing that because the student is the one doing the active learning, it's much more powerful. So instead of me lecturing about it, we're actually going to do it so that you get to experience it. So let's see if this works. Um, so the kind of idea that I could choose to lecture about if I want, but I'm going to use this new teaching methodology. Are all the slides in the web conference required to be designed using Beyond Bullet Point? And the answer is that, and we talked a little bit about that the first week, that the majority of your slides will be designed using Beyond Bullet Point design, which we learned about in EDT 8110. But there's going to be some BPP slides. So, you're going to have a little bit of both. You have to use your best judgment. You're the person in charge. You're the person designing it. And I'm not going to be there when you do it. I have to trust you guys to make your best judgment that this slide should be Beyond Bullet Point. This slide should not. Now, as an instructor, as a grader, if I look at a slide and I think that this is really doesn't look very good, I'm going to give you some feedback. And if it's I think that it would have cognitive overload, it could impact the grade. So some examples of some slides that I would recommend not using Beyond Bullet Point is like your title slide or your learning objective slide, or those signaling slides for each one of the 4 practical inquiring identifying slides, like the triggering phase, the exploration phase, the integration phase, and the resolution phase. I would recommend having those slides with a solid dark background. Black or gray is perfect, and then the phase name written in white so that there's high contrast. So other slides that probably would not be Beyond Bullet Point would be like activity slides that we just talked about a minute ago, where you're going to have prompts and directions and maybe screenshots. And another slide that would not be Beyond Bullet Point might be any other section slides that divide it up. So this is not an exhaustive list, but those are some examples of slides that would not be Beyond Bullet Point. But the majority of your slides should be designed using this Beyond Bullet Point. And this is an example in this purple of a slide that definitely is Beyond Bullet Point. It's got you can have an optional title at the top, the 2-line headline, and then one image that aligns, and it's 1 point per slide. So you do want the majority of your slides to follow this model. So we're going to do an activity here, and I'm going to try to do this because I realize you guys are listening to this virtually, and let's see if we can do this. This activity is designed to allow you to use your perceptions to identify effective Beyond Bullet Point design slides, and also effective just design guidelines as far as general design overall. So we'll see if we can do this successfully. So let's talk a little bit about perceptual learning. We're going to compare it first to lecturing. Lecturing, we're all familiar with that. It's a passive form of learning where the students are told by the instructor. So in this case, I could have an entire lecture. There's 10 examples, and I could pull it up, and I could tell you about each and every one of these 10 examples. We are not going to do that because that's a passive process. Learning needs to be an active process where we just don't, we just don't see. We need to use all of our senses. We need to see and listen and hear and make judgments. So what we're going to try to do, and try this with your students too, we're going to try to move from a passive form of lecture to an active form of perceptual learning to do this activity, to let you guys experience it. So here's the activity. Remember, Beyond Bullet Point is that very specific design to minimize cognitive load when designing presentation slides. So even with perceptual learning activities, whatever the topic, you can do short, mini, micro lectures. That's no problem. we learned about beyond bullet point in EDT 8110. So this activity is going to take that information we learned in 8110 and then give you more practice. But we're also going to include some effective design tips and techniques and allow you to make those choices in this perceptual activity too. So we'll do both. And what we're going to do is I will give you some examples, and you could even do this before you ever learn about beyond bullet point. Just allow them to guess. And even with just guessing about something they know nothing about, the research shows it's amazingly effective. So you're just going to guess if it's right or wrong, but because you guys already know a lot about it, I'm guessing that you'll make some good choices. And what's going to happen is as the examples go through, what I'm asking you to do is to pause the video and then take out a piece of paper and write down the issues with the slides that you hear on the example slides, and then click play again. And on the following slide, I will give you the response. So, one of the challenges with this and doing it in this environment, will you know with 100% certainty that students take the time to try to perceive what the right answer is, to try to figure out what's wrong with the slides? You can't control it. I don't know with 100% certainty that you guys will do this. So it's just the honor code system with having you guys do this. So, I guess that's one downside of not being there live. So let's get started. Here's example one. Take a look at this slide in red. That's the portion, pretend like that's the slide. And what I want you to do is to review the example below and write down what does not meet the beyond bullet point or effective design guidelines. And I'm going to take a drink real quick, but you guys go ahead and pause the video and then write down your answer. And when you have what you think it is, click play to go to the next slide. But I'm going to take a quick drink here. All right, let's go to the next slide. And the issue is that on the previous slide, there's too many points per slide and it's all text. So there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 bullets, and you should only have 1 point per slide. So all of those 6 points should be removed, and only the very first point should be on that slide. So it's 1 point per slide, and then there should be an accompanying image that aligns closely with it. So there's just too much cognitive overload on that slide. All right, going on to the next one, example number 2. Pause the video, look at the slide below in the red, and write down how that doesn't meet the beyond bullet point or effective design guidelines. Okay, hopefully you got that. It does have a title, but it needs a 1 to 2 line headline at the top that's got a noun and a verb, and that's a short summary that completely summarizes the single point of the slide. So it's missing that headline. Moving on, example number 3. Take a look below in the red and tell me what doesn't meet beyond bullet point or effective design guidelines. Pause and write down your answer. Okay, a couple of things wrong here. The first is the image on the left. That image itself has got extremely poor quality. It's too grainy, but not only is it too grainy, the bomb is a picture that's a homonym, and it sounds like what you're trying to say. So on the left it says faculty conflict, and it uses a bomb to represent that conflict, when really you should be using an image that's an actual representation of the point that you're trying to make. So on the right, that's more of an actual representation versus the bomb, sounds like the point you're trying to make, but it's a completely different point, and that could cause cognitive dissonance. So on the right, try to find something that's more of a literal representation. Okay, moving on. Example number 5. Take a look at the image below and write what doesn't meet the beyond bullet point and or effective design guidelines. Go ahead and pause and write your response. Now this one's a little bit harder to see. On the left, you can see that that image that was used had a copyright symbol or mark on them. So you definitely want to make sure that the images that you use do not have any copyright marks whatsoever. Sometimes they're actually kind of difficult to see, and I chose this one specifically, but if you look where his pencil is, pointing at the top and then straight across over his mouth, that's where that image is. You can just barely see it, but believe me, it's there and you have to be careful. So example number 6, take a look at the image below in the red, pause the video and write what doesn't meet the beyond bullet point or effective design guidelines. Okay, so on this one, you have to be careful to have high contrast between the background and the text to ensure maximum readability. So they have a dark purple background with a dark black text. It's just too difficult to read. So in this case, the dark background with the white text gives the high contrast that makes it much easier to read. Okay, example number 7. Take a look below and pause the video. Tell me what doesn't meet the beyond bullet point and or effective design guidelines. So in this case, it's just too long of a headline. That's too much information, which is going to cause cognitive overload. You want to keep your headlines to a consistent 2-line that has a noun and a verb and is a very, very short summary of the single point of that slide. If you absolutely can't get it to 2 lines, then I'm thinking you have too many points on that slide and that maybe you need 2 slides, but that's too much information. So example number 8, look at the example below and tell me, what doesn't meet the beyond bullet point design. And this one is more of a design issue. Okay, so if you look at the one on the left, if you're using a ping, an image that's not a ping, it's going to have a white background. And in this case, it's got that black background, which just doesn't look good. And so in some cases, when you have a dark background, you really want to search for images that have a transparent background, and those would be ping images, PNG, and they're going to look much better when you have that dark background. If you have a white background, it's usually not an issue because the white background on a white slide, you don't even see it. But in this case, you can see it. So just remember, in those cases where it looks bad, you just have to make a judgment. All right, example number 9. Look at the slide below and pause it and tell me what doesn't meet beyond bullet point or effective design guidelines. And this one's pretty obvious, I think. Okay, so in this case, you have to be careful with. I never like to use a background that has a light and dark image. I don't even like to use multicolored backgrounds, but in this case, you have a background that has a darker color and a lighter color, so you will never find a text color that works because if you choose a dark color, you're not going to see it with a dark background. If you have a light colored text, it's not going to work with a light colored background. So you're just in a lose-lose situation. So you need to have a solid background to make sure that the text is readable. So you can override that issue. So in this particular case, if you made your headline a solid background, you would be able to do it. But quite honestly, I don't even like that. I think that background is just too busy and causes cognitive overload. So do yourself a favor and go with simpler, solid colors. You can never go wrong with white slides and black text, but just be very, very sensitive to that. And then our last example, take a look at this and review the example and write down what doesn't belong to meet beyond bullet point and/or effective design guidelines. Now this one's a little bit more subtle. Be careful when you're using images on a colored background or really any background. Um, I think that image on the left doesn't have a crisp enough separator from the background. So think about your images using right click on the images, go into the properties, and give it a border. And the border is just going to make it pop and have a lot better quality. So that was the perceptual. So we did two things there. We did an activity to take your level of beyond bullet point a little bit higher, but we also did a teaching methodology called the perceptual learning, which allowed you to make the choices and before I would actually share, which is an active form of learning. So hopefully you liked it. I just wanted to give it a try. So here we are. You're in week number 3. Let me summarize. This week, you should continue to work in chapters 3 and 4, which you should have read last week. And then you're going to be creating your second web conference, which is a synchronous web conference using the assessment tools. Let the instructor know you're done by posting a self-reflection. Remember, you need to be a fake student in at least 2 of your colleagues' sessions. And then you do a peer review for one of your colleagues that's due next Tuesday. So in conclusion, just a reminder, hopefully everything is going okay. Hopefully these videos are getting you the information that you need. And I'm just going to be so appreciative for you guys to continue to work as a community of learners to support each other and to help each other to be successful, whatever's going on in campus, that we will get through this. And please keep supporting each other and making this work. I appreciate it. But that's it. Keep up the good work. I want to thank everybody for everything. Thanks so much. And that's it for week 3.